Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into the shockingly unhygienic world of royal beauty routines. Specifically, the questionable cleanliness habits of history's most powerful women, queens, duchesses, and noble ladies who wore silk gowns but probably smelled like expired dairy. Before you get too comfortable, hit that like button and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy my content. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing our global audience. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for some ambient noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You'd imagine queens draped in fine silks and drinking from jewel-encrusted cups would have regular dates with marble bathtubs and lavender-scented loofahs, right? Think again. In one of history's greatest ironies, royal women were often the least bathed people in Europe, and this wasn't due to poor plumbing. It was completely intentional. Here's the thing. Back then, bathing wasn't just unnecessary. Medical experts considered it downright dangerous. The same brilliant court physicians who believed hysteria came from a wandering womb declared that hot water opened your pores, those tiny drawbridges of the skin, and invited disease like an intrusive neighbor. Plague? In. Demons? Also in. The solution? Simple. Don't bathe. Ever. Queen Isabella of Castile famously boasted she only bathed twice in her life, at birth and before her wedding. After that, her body became a closed ecosystem, a soap-defying, nation-conquering marvel of minimal hygiene. When queens did attempt bathing, it required military-level logistics. First, servants had to heat about 40 buckets of water. Then pray they didn't scald their royal employer or leave her shivering in lukewarm disappointment. Most tubs were leaky wooden barrels, less spa day, more parasite soup. So instead, royal women perfected the wipe and pray method. They'd rub linen cloths against unwashed skin to remove surface grime. No water, no soap, just friction and denial. To mask the accumulating human aroma, perfume, gallons of it. We're talking floral oils, powdered ambergris, anything vaguely plant-based. It wasn't so much pleasant as aggressively fragrant, like being punched in the face by a rose bush. Some gowns had herbs sewn directly into the fabric, creating walking potpourri baskets of despair. Others reeked of violet water and resignation. But to 14th century noses, this was the height of sophistication. In an ideal world, royalty would have used soap and water. But that would require acknowledging two uncomfortable truths. One, they had pores, and two, their bodies produced odors like commoners. And that simply wouldn't do. So they turned to perfume, glorious, overwhelming, sinus-assaulting perfume. Royal women didn't just wear fragrance, they weaponized it. The goal wasn't to smell good, but to smell stronger than whatever microbial civilization was growing beneath their corsets. They didn't dab perfume behind their ears, oh no. They bathed in it, sprayed it into wigs, rubbed it into gloves, even infused their furniture with scent. Sit on a duchess's chair? You'd leave smelling like decaying violets and faint ammonia, a true aristocratic souvenir. Perfume was political too. A well-scented noblewoman projected wealth, grace, and most importantly, distance. If you could mask 4 days of sweat with top notes of jasmine and a base of ambergris, which, fun fact, is whale vomit, you clearly had power. Queen Marie Antoinette employed a personal perfumer to create custom scents for every occasion. Morning perfume, afternoon perfume, I'm being beheaded perfume, each distinct yet equally floral in its desperate attempt to gaslight the entire court about her hygiene. Royal ladies carried scented handkerchiefs to press against their noses when poorer, and presumably cleaner, people entered the room. Some wore pomanders, decorative herb-filled orbs held under the nose like medieval air fresheners. In the end, perfume didn't make them clean. It just made their uncleanliness more stylish. They were essentially walking potpourri baskets with political influence. Royal women wore history's most extravagant outfits: velvet, silk, brocade, fur, skirts that could double as emergency tents, bodices so tight they induced spiritual visions. But one crucial difference separated their fashion from modern couture. These dresses were almost never washed. Laundry was whispered about in servant quarters like some dark alchemical ritual involving water, fire, and possibly witchcraft. Most royal garments were too expensive, delicate, and structurally complex for washing. Instead, dresses got aired out, hung near a window for a few hours, and declared fresh. A gown that hosted a week of banquets, a christening, and the beginnings of trench foot? No problem, just let it breathe, and hope the perfume overpowered the bacteria. We're not just talking outerwear here. These were multi-layered ensembles, chemises, petticoats, stays, corsets, gowns, trains, all absorbing a rotating cocktail of sweat, body oils, food spills, and powdered wig fallout. If these dresses could talk, they'd beg for cremation. Some courts allowed slightly more washable undergarments, but washable meant boiling in lye and beating with wooden paddles, a process most queens avoided in favor of the ignore and respritz method. Even better, dresses were often shared, not among equals, how peasant, but handed down to ladies-in-waiting and junior nobles. Hand-me-down meant inheriting someone else's dried sweat and perfume crust embedded in taffeta. To maintain appearances, queens maintained wardrobes of hundreds of gowns, not for hygiene rotation, but to avoid being seen in the same outfit twice. It was about fashion, not freshness. Cleanliness was optional. Appearing poor was unthinkable. By the 17th to 18th centuries, European royalty collectively decided growing your own hair was for peasants and monks. Wigs became the ultimate status symbol. Bigger, whiter, and more architecturally ambitious the better. For royal women, this wasn't about hiding thinning hair. It was social supremacy through detachable head furniture. Some wigs stood over a foot tall, powdered ghostly white with flour or starch, then decorated with bows, feathers, artificial flowers, and occasionally miniature ships with sails. Yes, women walked around with naval battles atop their heads while modern folks stress about hair mousse. Now the dirty truth, these wigs were rarely cleaned. You couldn't just shampoo them. They were glued, sewn, or pinned on. The solution? More powder and denial. Enter the lice. These floral powder-covered nests became five-star resorts for head lice. The warm base, organic ingredients, and lack of disturbance created paradise for ambitious insects. Queens weren't oblivious. They used louse sticks, bejeweled scratching rods for discreet public itching. If that sounds grim, consider the rodents sometimes attracted to the wigs, mistaking them for pastries or nesting material. Some ladies woke to find their wigs gnawed overnight, leading to wig cages, wire head enclosures for sleeping, presumably next to whatever dignity remained. Yet these towering disasters were considered beautiful, symbols of wealth and, ironically, cleanliness. More powder meant less visible sweat. So next time your conditioner disappoints, be grateful your hair doesn't require scaffolding, rodent traps, or its own storage room. Every royal court had its signature status symbols: crowns, scepters, thrones, and for countless noblewomen, an elegant little tool for discreetly excavating their scalps. These weren't ordinary twigs plucked from the garden. They were called louse sticks, sophisticated ivory or gold-plated implements with delicate handles and one brutally specific purpose. Wielded like royal wands, they allowed queens and countesses to casually mine their powdered scalps in public while maintaining perfect posture and pretending absolutely nothing was wrong. Of course, something was very wrong. When your towering wig essentially functioned as a feathered bread loaf stuffed with starch and wishful thinking, you were bound to get visitors. And when those visitors started biting, you couldn't just scream and slap your head like some common field worker. No, you had to scratch with dignity, hoping nobody noticed the look of pure relief flashing across your powdered face. Court etiquette governed everything from fork selection to proper lice excavation techniques. Too aggressive? Uncouth. Too gentle? Ineffective. The ideal method was a slow, contemplative motion, as if you were pondering state affairs rather than hunting an insect behind your left ear. Some louse sticks were so ornate they doubled as hairpins or jewelry. Others featured compartments for scented oils, allowing simultaneous perfume application and pest control. multitasking at its most aristocratic. Court gossip even included whispered rankings of who scratched most frequently and who suffered silently out of pride. A duchess might endure unbearable itching rather than admit her scalp had been colonized. Vanity knew no limits, especially when your hairstyle weighed more than a toddler. But lice weren't the only invaders. The powder buildup made wigs increasingly itchy, flaky, and vaguely crusty. Sometimes the louse stick wasn't even for bugs, just digging through layers of starch and regret to reach actual skin. If you thought lice were the final boss of medieval hairstyling, meet their more ambitious cousin, mice. Yes, actual whiskered, nibble-happy rodents. Those massive 18th century wigs, thoroughly dusted in flour and animal fat while avoiding water at all costs, became ideal nesting sites. Warm, stationary buffets that practically glowed with vacancy signs. Many noble women discovered this the hard way, waking to the horrifying realization their hairstyle had become rodent housing. Others remained oblivious until a telltale squeak betrayed the intruder during court proceedings. Nothing screams elegance like a mouse diving from your coiffure mid-banquet. The solution? Wig cages, essentially medieval hair helmets designed to protect sleeping aristocrats from becoming unintentional landlords to small mammals. Did they work? Occasionally. Mostly they added insult to injury, combining lice, migraines, neck pain, and now rodent proofing, all for a hairstyle that from afar resembled an over-decorated wedding cake with self-esteem issues. Yet these towering disasters symbolized wealth, status, and glorious detachment from human frailty. Fashion wasn't about practicality, but spectacle, even if that spectacle included an entire ecosystem living rent-free atop your head. Meanwhile, royal skincare routines mixed vinegar, white lead, and crushing societal expectations into a toxic paste. The 18th century ideal was porcelain perfection, pale, smooth skin glowing with the freshness of someone who'd never encountered sunlight or criticism. This wasn't just beauty. It signaled nobility and the luxury of avoiding peasant labor. Since nature rarely delivered such perfection, royal women turned to dangerous home chemistry. The infamous Venetian ceruse, a lead-in vinegar paste, provided flawless coverage while slowly destroying the skin beneath. Peeling, sores, hair loss, just signs of delicate constitution. Makeup application was anything but subtle. Thick white bases, mercury-laced rouge, and beauty marks, sometimes covering festering sores caused by previous beauty marks. The cycle continued. More ceruse to cover damage caused by ceruse. Patches or mooches made from velvet, silk, or disturbingly, actual mouse fur, were glued strategically. One near the mouth signaled flirtation. By the eye meant passion. On the chin suggested you'd been poisoned but remained photogenic. Meanwhile, royal dental health was a medieval horror show. Sugar had arrived in Europe, and nobility consumed it like it contained vitamins rather than future tooth decay. The results? Revolting teeth, rot, abscesses, blackened stumps. The solution? Stop using teeth entirely. Meals became mush, consumed with spoons, or drunk through pained grimaces. Queen Elizabeth I's later years saw such dental decay that foreign diplomats complained about deciphering her speech. Smiling with teeth was considered vulgar anyway. That was for tavern workers and children. A royal woman's best accessory was mystery, even if it smelled of clove oil and necrosis. Cleansing involved honey wine rinses or clove-stuffed mouths. Tooth extraction performed without anesthesia by the local barber surgeon, because apparently haircutting and molar removal required similar skill sets. Under all those silk and velvet layers, often nothing. The concept of underwear was considered either too masculine or beneath noble women. Shifts, basic linen smocks, provided minimal coverage, but beneath that, just air and prayer. This created logistical nightmares when nature called. Imagine hovering over a chamber pot while balancing 30 pounds of gown, corset, and zero elastic support. The bourdaloue, a gravy boat-shaped urinal, allowed discreet relief during long events. Even when underwear appeared in late 18th century, It was viewed as suspiciously French or unnecessarily practical. Royal fashion materials triggered violent allergic reactions. Silk treated with mercury, lace stiffened with lead starch for shedding mid-banquet. Corsets of whalebone or metal compressed torsos fashionably while causing eczema and breathing difficulties. Jewelry, pearls, rubies, and copper, which turned skin green, completed outfits. Layered ensembles meant winter overheating and summer marination. Some outfits were sewn directly onto the body. If you swelled or reacted mid-dressing, your options were suffer silently or blame the peasants. Bathing, when attempted, was a major production. Giant wooden tubs were hauled in, requiring servants to transport dozens of water buckets. Heating required fires and patience. Modesty often meant bathing in linen shifts that conveniently trapped dirt against skin. Water wasn't changed between bathers. The highest ranked went first. Post-bath, linen cloths or powders, sometimes containing lead, dried the skin. Menstruation was the unspoken reality beneath all this grandeur. Without modern products, noble women used rag-and-belt systems that frequently failed spectacularly. Privacy was non-existent. Ladies-in-waiting assisted with awkward dress lifting and crisis management. Menstruation was political too. Missed periods sparked pregnancy rumors. Frequent bleeding was deemed unnatural. Queen and 17 pregnancies, many ending tragically, meant every bodily function was interpreted like prophecy. The church didn't help. Menstruating women were barred from sacred spaces, as if femaleness might offend God. Ultimately, royal hygiene wasn't about health but illusion. Power smelled like violets, fear, and aggressive denial of biology. While European royalty was busy powdering wigs and pretending not to itch, across the globe in Edo period Japan, an entirely different culinary culture was flourishing, one where rice wasn't just food, but the very currency of civilization. Imagine a society where salaries, social status, and taxes were measured not in coins, but in bushels of grain. This was life under the Tokugawa shogunate, where a samurai's income was calculated in koku, enough rice to feed one man for a year. Even peasants at society's bottom were valued by their rice production capacity. But we're not talking microwavable instant rice here. This was carefully polished white rice, a luxury compared to the coarse brown varieties eaten by the poor. Rice manifested in every meal, shaped into onigiri, those triangular rice balls older than your favorite anime, wrapped in seaweed, or paired with pickled vegetables and dried fish. For the wealthy daimyo lords and top-tier samurai, rice came with lavish sides, grilled eel, onagi, sweetened black beans, or miso-marinated tofu. But for common townsfolk, a humble bowl of rice with miso soup and pickled daikon radish if they were lucky. Beyond sustenance, rice held spiritual significance, offered to household gods and ancestors, consumed during weddings and funerals. Even eating etiquette carried weight. Never stick chopsticks upright in rice. It resembles funeral rites, and chew quietly unless you want to offend the rice gods. The perfect complement to rice? Miso soup. Not the watery stuff from your local sushi chain, but the soul of Edo period meals across all classes. This wasn't just soybean sludge, it was fermented alchemy. Housewives maintained crocks of aging miso like edible treasure, while the broth, built on bonito and kelp dashi, delivered smoky umami that would make modern chefs weep. Regional varieties abounded. Salty red miso for samurai households, sweet white miso for delicate palates, even hacho miso so dense it could double as building material. Buddhist monks relied on miso during vegetarian fasts, believing it balanced bodily energies. Whether containing tofu cubes or just radish peels, no meal was complete without this steaming, savory anchor. Then came tsukmano, pickles that punched far above their weight. In a land without refrigeration, preserving everything from daikon to eggplant became survival science. Taquan, bright yellow pickled radish, wasn't just tangy, it was considered spiritual palate cleanser. Omebashi, pickled plums so sour they could make a sumo wrestler cry, accompanied samurai into battle, believed to ward off fatigue and demons. The most inventive? Nookazuk, vegetables fermented in rice bran beds that required daily stirring like some high-maintenance pet. These weren't side dishes, but edible history, offered at shrines, essential to Buddhist practice, and one of life's few pleasures when your day involved backbreaking labor or courtly repression. Street food culture exploded in Edo's million-strong metropolis. Yatai, food stalls, lined bridges and alleys, serving soba noodles, the era's fast food, delivered by sprinting couriers balancing stacked boxes like culinary ninjas. Odin, simmered stew, warmed hands and bellies with boiled eggs and kanyaka gelatin. Grilled eel, a stamina food for sweltering summers. Let commoners briefly taste nobility. Sweet potatoes and roasted chestnuts satisfied sugar cravings centuries before bubble tea. Even samurai, technically forbidden from eating while walking, sneaked soba between official duties. This was dining democracy, where merchants, laborers, and off-duty monks slurped shoulder to shoulder, united by hunger and sizzling soy aromas. Samurai diets revealed fascinating contradictions. As warrior poets, they ate two modest meals daily: rice, miso soup, pickles, but with higher quality ingredients than peasants. Dried sea bream or sesame-glazed tofu signaled status without gluttony, overeating being dishonorable. Banquets, however, unleashed seasonal delicacies: bamboo shoots, mushroom dishes, chestnut flower sweets arranged like edible haiku. The kicker? No red meat, taboo for the ruling class. Their protein came from fish, shellfish, and creative tofu preparations that would make any vegan proud. Meals ended with green tea contemplation, because nothing says, "I could decapitate you," like sipping matcha in silence. Peasants survived on ingenuity. Their rice was mixed with barley or millet to stretch meager harvests. Protein came from natto, fermented soybeans with the consistency and smell of regret, or occasional dried sardines. Wild mountain vegetables, ferns, burdock root, foraged and boiled into soups. Nothing was wasted. Stale rice became crackers, tough stems went into broth, even hearth ashes helped preserve food. These were meals born of necessity, fibrous, fermented, and surprisingly nutritious despite their simplicity. When a farmer's dessert was a roasted sweet potato or festival mochi, chewing slowly became the only luxury. The floating world's pleasure districts turned dining into seduction. In Yoshiwara's licensed quarters, geisha and merchants indulged in kaiseki, multi-course edible poetry where daikon carved into cranes and plum-shaped tofu reflected seasonal harmony. Sake flowed in thimble-sized cups, ensuring constant refills and lowered inhibitions. Dare to pair it with shiakara, salted squid guts, or fugu skin, because nothing says romance like potential neurotoxins. This was food as art, referenced in ukiyo-e prints and kabuki plays, where a poet might compare love to cold soba noodles. Fleeting, yet unforgettable. The stark contrast to farmers' rice gruel highlighted Edo's brutal inequalities, a feast built on peasant labor, enjoyed in floating worlds of illusion. Meanwhile, Buddhist temple cuisine, Shojin Ryori, embraced austere perfection: no meat, fish, onions, or garlic, considered desire stimulants. Instead, 5-flavor/5-color principles governed meals: grilled eggplant with miso, kelp-based dashi, mountain yam purees. Monk chefs turned tofu into eel imitations and crafted yuba, tofu skin, rolls with knife skills bordering on divine. Autumn mint simmered chestnuts. Spring brought wild mountain herbs. Each lacquered bowl held stillness and mindfulness. Eat to live, live to reflect, perhaps reach enlightenment one pickled turnip at a time. No flash, just profound flavors proving restraint could be its own richness. Seasonality ruled Edo's kitchens with sacred precision. Spring mint fiddlehead ferns and bamboo shoots. Summer demanded chilled noodles and cucumbers. Autumn brought mushrooms and grilled river fish. Winter required root vegetable stews and preserved daikon. Presentation mirrored nature. Maple leaves in fall, cherry blossoms in spring. Blue ceramics cooled summer meals. Earthy tones warmed winter fare. This wasn't just tradition, but spirituality. Shinto reverence for nature's cycles blended with Buddhist mindfulness. In a world without year-round strawberries, anticipation itself became seasoning. The first plum, the last new rice harvest. Edo cuisine reminds us that everything, even a humble meal, has its perfect moment. While Japanese nobility obsessed over seasonal delicacies, ancient Romans were busy turning hygiene into both an art form and social spectacle. Forget what you've heard about medieval filth. If Romans worshipped anything more than their emperors and wine, it was cleanliness. To be Roman was to be scrubbed, scraped, oiled, and rinsed with religious devotion. Bathing wasn't occasional. For many citizens, it was a daily ritual, sometimes twice. This wasn't just personal hygiene. It was civic duty performed with military precision. The Roman bathhouse made modern spas look like roadside motels. These weren't simple tubs, but sprawling complexes the size of football stadiums. The baths of Caracalla could accommodate 1,600 bathers simultaneously. Imagine marble-columned palaces with gymnasiums, libraries, snack bars, and gardens, all centered around the sacred act of getting clean. The engineering marvel? The hypocaust system. Underground furnaces pumping hot air through walls and floors centuries before central heating. Romans didn't just invent public bathing, they industrialized it. Bathing followed strict ritualistic sequences worthy of Olympic training. First stop, the apoditerium, changing room, where you'd strip and entrust your clothes to attendants, preferably honest ones since theft ran rampant. Next, the tepidarium, warm room, for gradual acclimation, where early gossip began circulating like the steam. Then the main event, the caldarium, sauna-like hot room, where citizens sat sweating out imperial stresses while slaves scraped them down with strigils, curved metal tools that removed oil and dead skin. The climax? The frigidarium's icy plunge pool, the ancient equivalent of an espresso shot for the senses. But these bathhouses were far more than cleaning stations. They became Rome's ultimate social equalizers. Senators rubbed shoulders, literally, with merchants, soldiers, and philosophers, all naked and temporarily stripped of status. The baths blurred class lines in ways that would make politicians nervous. Here a slave could share bathing tips with his master. Women had designated hours, though early mixed bathing caused enough scandal to prompt periodic bans. The air hung thick with more than steam. Politics, business deals, and romantic liaisons flourished between scrubs. Entire careers were made or broken in the caldarium's haze. The baths also served as ancient wellness centers where doctors prescribed steam sessions like modern physical therapy. Different temperatures treated various ailments. Warm soaks for joint pain, cold plunges for circulation. Natural hot springs like those at Baiae became medical pilgrimage sites where the wounded and arthritic sought relief. Of course, some treatments involved questionable science, balancing the four humors through strategic sweating or applying leeches between massages. But compared to alternatives like temple sleep or bloodletting, the baths offered relatively sane healthcare. As the empire declined, so did bathing culture. Christian leaders viewed the practice as suspiciously pagan. Too much nudity, too much pleasure. By medieval times, the great bathhouses stood abandoned, their hypocaust systems forgotten. Yet their legacy survived in Islamic hammams and eventually modern spas. Today, their ruins remind us how Romans turned basic hygiene into civilization itself, proving that sometimes societal progress is measured not in wars won, but in how comfortably citizens can sweat together. While the Romans perfected the art of public bathing, medieval French nobility turned dining into a theatrical power play where food wasn't just sustenance, it was propaganda. Picture a torchlit great hall draped in tapestries, the air thick with the scent of roast venison, cloves, and the faintest whiff of roasted peacock. Yes, actual peacock, feathers meticulously reattached post-cooking. The message? I can slaughter beauty and serve it with flair. What have you accomplished today, Sir Gerard? Feasts weren't meals, they were edible conquests. Guests sat strictly by rank. High nobles up front, lesser ones in back, peasants outside with the pigs. The meal began with trumpets, heralds, and occasionally a juggler tossing meat pies. Absurd? Absolutely. Theatrical? Deliberately so. This was culinary warfare, where status was measured in pastry swans and the number of spices you could afford to waste. The table itself was a stage. Servers moved with choreographed precision, delivering courses that defied logic. Boar stuffed with birds stuffed with sausages, fish dyed crimson with crushed berries, meatballs sculpted into hedgehogs. Then came the subtleties, sugar sculptures of castles, pies that erupted with live birds, or, in one infamous case, musicians. The goal wasn't just to feed, but to stun. When your dessert was a gilded hedgehog spearing a marzipan knight, you weren't dining. You were witnessing edible propaganda. Even the plates were part of the spectacle. Trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread, soaked up meat juices and sauces, then were donated to the poor post-feast. Generosity? Sure, but mostly it meant nobles didn't have to clean their own grease. Medieval French ingredients read like a merchant's fever dream. Spices, cloves, cinnamon, mace were dumped into everything not because they masked spoiled meat. A myth. Nobles ate fresh game. But because rarity equaled power. Saffron turned dishes gold. A single pinch cost more than a peasant's monthly wages. Meat wasn't just food, but hierarchy. Venison from royal hunts. Peacocks served in full plumage. Even porpoise, classified as fish for linen loopholes. Sugar, still a luxury, sweetened everything, from meats to fish sauces, because balance was for peasants. The wealthy ate color as much as flavor. Sandalwood turned sauces red, charcoal blackened crusts, spinach dyed pies emerald. Vegetables, boiled into oblivion. Raw produce was deemed cold and dangerous. Why eat an apple when you could poach it in wine, stuff it with spiced breadcrumbs, and call it medicine? Samurai might meditate over tea, but French nobles weaponized gluttony. A proper feast required service and confusion. Dishes arriving in chaotic abundance meant to overwhelm. Roast peacock beside sugar-dusted eel, a salad of flowers and gold leaf, a pie that, when cracked open, revealed a cooked lamb posed mid-joust with a roasted piglet. The message? My kitchen can outwit nature itself. Yet for all the excess, dining etiquette was rigid. No forks, just knives, spoons, and 3 fingers. Pinky stayed clean, proving you weren't a savage. Bread was torn, never bitten. Reaching across another's trencher meant war. Sneezing required a formal apology. Wine flowed, but drinking before the host. Unthinkable. Getting drunk was acceptable, provided the whole table joined you. Religious rules shaped menus, too. Fast days banned meat, dairy, and eggs, so chefs got creative. Almond milk replaced cream. Fish was molded into roast pork shapes. Spiced tofu mimicked venison. Lent became a game of culinary deception. A meatless feast might feature 10 kinds of seafood and a sugar sculpture of the Last Supper. The legacy? Modern French cuisine's foundations. Sauces thickened with breadcrumbs, wine reductions, layered flavors, all trace back to medieval excess. That croquembouche towering at a pâtisserie, a direct descendant of sugar castles meant to impress kings. Even the Michelin-starred obsession with presentation echoes feasts where food wasn't served but unveiled. So while we've ditched the live-bird pies, the core remains. In France, food was, and is, power. Whether it's a peasant's pottage or a Parisian chef's 15-course tasting menu, every bite whispers history. Just be grateful your dessert no longer requires a fire-breathing pastry dragon. While French nobility staged culinary theater, their English counterparts perfected the art of smelling like a walking apothecary shop. Queen Elizabeth I court took perfume to new heights, or depths, with her famous Eau d'Armada blend, created to celebrate the 1588 Spanish Armada defeat. This wasn't just floral water, it was olfactory propaganda, mixing rose, orange blossom, and ambergris, again with the whale vomit, into a scent so potent it reportedly made the Spanish ambassador sneeze during negotiations. Take that, Philip II. The Elizabethan hygiene paradox reached its peak with the sweet bag, small perfumed sachets nobles carried to mask body odor and, theoretically, ward off plague. These contained anything from dried roses to crushed beetles for that vibrant crimson scent, creating a portable cloud of desperation. Some aristocrats went further, stuffing their mattresses with herbs like lavender and wormwood, resulting in beds that smelled like a botanical garden but did nothing against actual fleas. The Earl of Oxford famously bankrupted himself importing Italian citrus oils, proving vanity could outweigh fiscal sense even during Renaissance inflation. Meanwhile, hair care involved more alchemy than hygiene. The preferred shampoo of nobility was a mixture of rosemary ashes and wine, an early precursor to modern clarifying treatments that left locks squeaky clean and slightly drunk. Wigs, adopted from French fashion, were powdered with scented starch that turned rancid within weeks, creating that distinctive Elizabethan aroma somewhere between a bakery and a taxidermist shop. Queen Bess herself owned over 80 wigs, each requiring daily maintenance by the Office of the Queen's Hair, a team of servants whose sole job was to de-lice and repowder these towering structures. Dental care? Practically medieval, because it was. The upper crust used tooth cloths, linen rags dipped in abrasive pastes of crushed brick or salt. The more adventurous tried dentifrices of burnt hartshorn, deer antler, and honey, which whitened teeth by literally scraping off enamel. When cavities struck, barber surgeons would extract teeth with tools resembling medieval torture devices. No anesthesia, just a strong drink and a prayer. Sir Walter Raleigh's account book lists payment for tooth drawers right between new silk stockings and bear-baiting tickets, showing dental work ranked somewhere below hosiery and bloodsport in importance. Makeup was equally hazardous. The coveted alabaster complexion required rouge, that same lead-in vinegar paste that poisoned French nobility. Applied thickly, it cracked like dried mud, requiring constant touch-ups that introduced more lead into the bloodstream. For rouge, women used mercury-based vermilion or crushed mulberries, while a brightener contained, wait for it, powdered mercury. This led to the era's signature feverish glow, which wasn't romantic flush, but actual heavy metal poisoning. The Earl of Leicester's accounts show his mistress received a pot of Venetian ceruse and a coffin in the same delivery, dark foreshadowing masquerading as a gift basket. Even clean, linen shirts were anything but. Starch was the Elizabethan equivalent of dry shampoo. Nobles would layer ruffs and collars with increasingly stiffened linen to avoid washing, which would ruin the elaborate pleats. The starch itself, made from wheat or roots, often attracted vermin. A surviving letter from the Countess of Shrewsbury complains about mice nesting in her husband's ruff during church, the 16th century version of Can We Leave Yet? Underclothes were theoretically changed daily, but change often meant turning the smock inside out for another week's wear. Perfume, again, was the solution, leading to that classic Tudor bouquet of rose water overlying stale sweat. Bathing remained controversial. While continental Europeans maintained some Roman bathing traditions, English reformers like William Tyndale declared baths popish and dangerous. Wealthy households might have wooden tubs brought to bedrooms, but these were rare occasions. Queen Elizabeth bathed once a month, whether necessary or not, according to her terrified staff. Most people relied on the dry wash method, rubbing down with scented cloths while standing in shifts before the fire. The Earl of Oxford, yes, him again, caused scandal by installing a plunge bath in his country home, which neighbors assumed would lead to either Roman decadence or instant death by chill. The ultimate status symbol? Clean hands. While the body might go unwashed for weeks, noble etiquette demanded spotless fingers. This led to elaborate hand-washing rituals before meals, using rose water poured from silver ewers into bowls lined with herbs. The same hands that hadn't touched water in a month would be fastidiously scrubbed in public view, because appearances mattered more than actual cleanliness. After all, why bathe your whole body when you could just perfume your gloves? In the end, Elizabethan hygiene was a performance where perception trumped reality. You might be crawling with lice, your teeth blackened by decay, your skin slowly poisoning itself with lead. But as long as your ruff stood stiff and your gloves smelled of ambergris, you were the picture of Renaissance refinement. It was an era when smelling like a Venetian brothel's spice cabinet counted as self-care, and where cleanliness meant having servants to hide the dirt. Shakespeare probably smelled like a walking herb garden, and that was probably the best-smelling person in the room. While European nobility drowned themselves in perfume, halfway across the world in Ming Dynasty China, a radically different approach to hygiene was flourishing, one that would make even the most fastidious Roman bather blush. The Chinese elite didn't just wash, they elevated cleanliness to a spiritual practice, complete with poetry and philosophy. Imagine Venetian merchants' shock when they discovered Chinese officials bathed daily, sometimes twice, in heated cedar tubs while Europeans were still debating whether water spread disease. The Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644, treated bathing as both physical purification and mental discipline. Wealthy households maintained dedicated bathhouses with ingenious gravity-fed plumbing systems that would put Roman aqueducts to shame. These weren't just functional spaces, but miniature retreats. Scholars would compose poetry while soaking, officials dictated memos to secretaries from heated pools, and the truly enlightened practiced meditation baths, where stillness in water mirrored stillness of mind. The imperial family took this further. The Forbidden City's bath complexes included marble-soaking pools with jade inlays, where eunuchs tested water temperature with their elbows, the most sensitive body part, they believed, before the emperor entered. Hair care reached near religious significance. While Europeans layered rancid pomade, Chinese nobility used sophisticated herbal washes, boiled ginseng for strength, chrysanthemum for shine, and a revolutionary invention, the first recorded dandruff treatment using crushed magnolia buds. Court ladies would sit for hours having their knee-length hair meticulously detangled with ivory combs, then dressed with lightly scented camellia oil. The empress's monthly hair washing became a state event involving 12 attendants and 36 towels, one for each celestial constellation. Dental hygiene put Europe's tooth-gnashing barbers to shame. Chinese physicians developed early toothpaste from ginseng and salt, while the wealthy used delicate silver toothpicks stored in jade cases. The real innovation? The mouthwasher, a bamboo cylinder that shot streams of tea or herbal infusions between teeth. Ming medical texts described treating gum disease with honeysuckle rinses centuries before European dentists stopped blaming tooth decay on mouthworms. When Venetian trader Andrea Corsali wrote home about Chinese people's pearly teeth and sweet breath, his colleagues assumed he'd gone native. Skincare was equally advanced. While European women painted themselves with lead, Ming aristocracy used rice water toners and silk powder so fine it floated in air before settling on skin. The imperial court's most coveted beauty secret? Nightly applications of pearl cream, actual crushed pearls mixed with white jade powder and dew collected from lotus leaves at dawn. This wasn't vanity, but preventative medicine. Physicians believed external purity mirrored internal balance. A surviving 1421 memo from the Ministry of Rights even mandated officials keep clean face and hands when submitting reports, the world's first documented workplace grooming policy. The Chinese approach to sanitation would have given London's plague doctors an aneurysm. While Europeans tossed chamber pots into streets, Ming cities had elaborate waste removal systems. Night soil collectors paid premium prices for human waste to use as fertilizer, creating perhaps history's only profitable poop economy. Public bathhouses employed teams of ear cleaners, offering meticulous hygiene services with tiny silver spoons, a practice so beloved it spawned its own poetry genre. When Jesuit Matteo Ricci visited Beijing in 1601, he marveled at streets clean enough for emperors to eat from. This while Londoners waded through knee-deep sewage. Even menstrual hygiene outpaced Europe by centuries. While English noblewomen stuffed rags between their legs, Chinese women used washable cloth pads secured with silk belts, changed by maids in discreet rituals. Medical texts recommended special cleansing teas, during menstruation and documented correctly that menstrual blood didn't actually turn wine sour, as European superstition claimed. The imperial harem maintained strict hygiene logs tracking each concubine's cycle, not for fertility, but to ensure proper rest and herbal treatments during menstruation. The ultimate status symbol? Hand washing. Not the perfunctory dip Europeans practiced, but elaborate rituals with up to 7 steps using warm water, ash soap, and citrus rinses. Ming dining etiquette required guests to wash upon arrival, between courses, and after eating, a practice merchants initially found excessive until realizing it reduced banquet illnesses. The imperial court took this further, with eunuchs testing wash water temperature with specialized thermometers centuries before Fahrenheit invented his scale. This hygienic sophistication came crashing down during the Qing dynasty's isolationist policies, just as Europe was discovering basic sanitation. By the time British envoys arrived in the 18th century, they dismissed Chinese cleanliness as quirks of a fading civilization, while their own wigs still crawled with lice. The tragic irony? Europe's hygiene dark ages could have been avoided had they paid attention when Marco Polo described Hangzhou's public baths in 1298. But when your worldview centers on lead makeup and Fleuridan ruffs, perhaps the concept of washing daily really does seem like exotic extremism. While Ming China set hygiene standards that wouldn't be matched in Europe for centuries, the Islamic world during its golden age, 8th to 14th centuries, was busy revolutionizing cleanliness with scientific precision that would make modern germ theorists nod in approval. Forget the European Dark Ages. In cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, and Damascus, bathing wasn't just a habit, but a sacred science, with hospital-attached hammams that doubled as medical treatment centers. When Crusaders first encountered these heathen bathhouses, they were shocked to find Islamic physicians prescribing steam sessions for everything from battle wounds to melancholy, and it actually worked. The hammam became Islam's crowning hygienic achievement, not just a place to wash, but a community hub where politics, matchmaking, and philosophical debates steamed alongside bodies. Unlike Roman baths where social classes mixed uneasily, Islamic bathhouses maintained strict gender-segregated hours with elaborate protocols. Patrons progressed through warming rooms, hot rooms, and cooling chambers in ritual sequences unchanged for centuries. The real genius lay in the engineering. Intricate tile work that stayed cool underfoot, while domed ceilings circulated air, and underground furnaces that maintained perfect temperatures without smoke. When 12th century traveler Ibn Jubair described Damascene hammams as paradise on earth, he wasn't being poetic. The best baths had star-pierced domes creating celestial light effects above bathers. Islamic dental care shamed Europe's barbaric extractions. Pioneering surgeon al-Zarawi's 10th century kit contained scaling tools recognizable to modern dentists, and his texts describe using pumice toothpaste centuries before Europeans stopped blaming cavities on tooth worms. Wealthy Andalusians used miswak twigs from the toothbrush tree as natural bristle brushes, while Persian physicians developed clove oil anesthesia for root canals, a technique still used today. A surviving 13th century shopping list from a Cordoban noblewoman includes rosewater mouthwash, mint tooth powder, and gold-plated toothpicks, proving oral hygiene could be both effective and luxurious. Skincare reached pharmaceutical levels. Persian physician raises 9th century experiments with cold cream formulations, beeswax, rose oil, and rainwater, predated modern moisturizers by a millennium. The harems of Al-Andalus weren't just pleasure palaces, but laboratories where female chemists developed alum deodorants, saffron face masks, and hair removal paste, so effective Venetian traders smuggled them as Saracen beauty secrets. When Eleanor of Aquitaine imported these products to France during the Crusades, church officials initially banned them as witchcraft until aristocratic women refused to stop using them. Even menstrual hygiene saw innovation. While European women stuffed rags or sat on hay bales, Islamic medical texts describe absorbent cotton pads soaked in rosemary water, changed in private bathhouse chambers. Physician Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine devoted entire chapters to menstrual health, correctly identifying cycles as natural, not cursed, and recommending warm baths for cramps, advice that wouldn't reach Europe for 800 years. A 14th century Cairo gynecologist journal details prescribing iron-rich diets and rest during menstruation, treatments modern doctors would approve. The real game changer? Islamic sanitation engineering. While Londoners dumped chamber pots into the Thames, 10th century Cordoba had a sewage system servicing 300,000 residents, with underground pipes feeding waste to agricultural outskirts. Public baths maintained by religious endowments, wax, provided affordable hygiene, a concept so revolutionary that when King Alfonso VI conquered Toledo in 1085, his first act was preserving the bathhouses despite church objections. Islamic cities employed street sweepers, mandated waste disposal far from water sources, and in some cases, had functioning public toilets when Europeans still relieved themselves behind bushes. Hospital hygiene set standards we still follow. When the bubonic plague hit 14th century Europe, Islamic doctors like Ibn al-Khatib already understood contagion theory, writing, "Infection spreads through garments, vessels, and earrings." The famed Al-Mansuri Hospital in Cairo isolated infectious patients, used vinegar disinfectants, and changed bedding daily, practices that seemed like sorcery to visiting European physicians. A surviving inventory from 1284 Damascus lists hospital supplies, including copper wash basins, naturally antibacterial, lavender disinfectant, and disposable clay cups, the medieval equivalent of single-use medical equipment. This golden age couldn't last forever. As Islamic empires declined and Europe rose, the hygiene gap tragically reversed. By the 18th century, Ottoman bathhouses became tourist curiosities while Europeans reinvented plumbing, often poorly copying Islamic designs without understanding the science. Yet the legacy remains. Modern hospitals' emphasis on cleanliness, the global popularity of hammam spas, even the humble toothbrush, all owe debts to medieval Islamic innovators. When modern surgeons scrub in for operations, they're unconsciously replicating rituals first developed by 10th century physicians who understood something Europe wouldn't grasp until Pasteur. Cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's the foundation of survival itself. As the Islamic Golden Age waned, a new player entered the hygiene arena with all the subtlety of a Viking raid, medieval Scandinavia, where cleanliness wasn't about perfumed elegance, but raw survival in a world of ice and longships. Forget delicate rosewater rinses. These were people who turned sauna culture into a weapon against the elements, where sweating out a winter's worth of grime was less about vanity and more about not freezing to death. When Norse sagas mention Saturday baths, they're describing a ritual so intense it became legendary, with warriors scrubbing off battle filth and steam so thick it fogged up Valhalla's windows. The Viking approach to hygiene was deceptively sophisticated. Archaeological digs at sites like Birka reveal grooming kits containing ear spoons, toothpicks, and razor-sharp tweezers, all items that would look at home in a modern bathroom. Their signature move? The Strigil du Nord, a curved bone scraper used with rendered animal fat to remove dirt, proving even pillagers appreciated exfoliation. But the real shocker? DNA analysis of Viking combs shows meticulous craftsmanship that prevented lice, a luxury when Londoners were still using hedgehog bristles as hairbrushes. Sauna culture reached religious fervor. Icelandic sagas describe hot houses, where temperatures reached 200 degrees Fahrenheit 93 degrees Celsius, with bathers beating themselves with birch branches to stimulate circulation before plunging into snowdrifts, a practice that made Roman frigidariums look tame. These weren't just sweat lodges, but community hubs where deals were struck, disputes settled, and, according to scandalized Christian monks, marriages consummated. When Swedish King Olaf Tryggvason converted to Christianity, he reportedly kept his sauna habit, just added crosses to the steam room walls for divine approval. Hair care was serious business. Viking men spent hours braiding and oiling their locks with rendered fat mixed with ash, An early DIY pomade that repelled lice while giving that signature just rated a monastery sheen. Excavated combs showed teeth spaced precisely 0.2 millimeters apart, an engineering feat that removed nits without breakage. Women's hair rituals were even more intense, with some graves containing hair swords, ornamental pins long enough to double as self-defense weapons. The famed Viking shampoo of crushed lye and ashes wasn't just cleaning. It was chemical warfare against scalp parasites. Dental hygiene, surprisingly advanced. Runestones mention toothed twigs, early chew sticks, flavored with pine resin, while skeletal remains show fewer cavities than contemporary Europeans, possibly due to chewing birch bark, a natural antiseptic. The real kicker? Some Viking graves contain teeth with filed grooves. Archaeologists believe these held decorative gold wire, proving even dental work could be bling in the right hands or mouths. Laundry was a battle of its own. Viking women developed a lye soap so potent it could strip wool clean while removing skin layers, a recipe calling for ashes, animal fat, and sheer desperation. Clothes were beaten against rocks in icy streams, then disinfected by burying them in smokehouses, creating that signature campfire chic aroma even Parisian perfumers couldn't replicate. When Byzantine princess Anna Komnene described Norse mercenaries as frighteningly clean, she wasn't complimenting their manners, just noting they smelled better than her own courtiers. The ultimate Viking flex? Their ship's sanitation systems. Longships featured removable floorboards for waste disposal. Take that, Thames dumpers. While sagas mention crew washing daily with seawater, a discipline that reduced disease outbreaks during months at sea. Archaeologists found evidence of toilet bays on some vessels, private screened areas with collection buckets that were emptied overboard. Medieval maritime OSHA at work. When your Navy's hygiene outpaces landlocked capitals, you're doing something right, or terrifyingly pragmatic. This all came crashing down with Christianization. As Scandinavia converted, church officials declared saunas pagan holdovers, and by the 14th century, the Black Death wiped out much traditional knowledge. The tragic irony? Those same Norse sanitation practices, boiling water, steam cleaning, waste management, could have saved millions had Europe been listening. Instead, the continent chose to reinvent hygiene centuries later, when archaeologists started unearthing Viking combs and realizing these barbarians had been flossing before it was cool. Today's Scandinavian spa culture isn't some modern invention. It's ancestral memory encoded in steam rooms. When you see a Stockholmer braving icy waters after a sauna, they're channeling Vikings who knew something the perfumed courts forgot. Real cleanliness isn't about masking odors with flowers, but meeting nature head-on, preferably while naked and holding birch branches. As we close this odyssey through history's most bizarre hygiene rituals, one truth emerges. Cleanliness has always been less about purity and more about power. Whether it's Queen Isabella's twice-in-a-lifetime baths or Viking warriors exfoliating with bone scrapers, every culture's approach to hygiene reveals its deepest anxieties and aspirations. The Romans turned bathing into empire building. Islamic physicians made it life-saving science. The French perfumed their way to political dominance. Even the most absurd practices, Marie Antoinette's rodent-infested wigs, Ming Dynasty pearl facials, were attempts to control the uncontrollable, the messy, smelly, all-too-human body in a world that demanded godlike perfection. What does this mean for us, the supposedly enlightened descendants of these grimy ancestors? First, humility. That antibacterial hand gel in your bag? A direct descendant of the vinegar-soaked cloths medieval doctors used during plague outbreaks. Your organic shampoo? A posher version of Viking lye soap. That spa day you booked? A watered-down homage to Islamic hammams. We haven't escaped history, we've just commodified it. Second, perspective. For all our germophobia and skincare routines, modern hygiene remains deeply performative. We've swapped lead rouge for chemical peels, whalebone corsets for waist trainers, and chamber pots for smart toilets that play Mozart while analyzing your urine. The game hasn't changed, only the props. When you Instagram your hashtag self-care Sunday bubble bath, you're participating in the same theater of cleanliness that had Versailles nobles spraying themselves with enough perfume to choke a horse. But here's the real lesson. Hygiene has always been a battleground. The 14th century church banned baths as sinful. Victorian doctors warned against excessive washing. Even today, debates rage over antibacterial resistance and microbiome health. The line between cleanliness and obsession has always been slippery, sometimes literally. What medieval nobles, Ming scholars, and Viking raiders all understood, and we often forget, is that true hygiene isn't about erasing humanity's natural state. It's about surviving it with style. So the next time you're scrubbing behind your ears, spare a thought for the centuries of trial, error, and outright madness that got us here. Remember Queen Elizabeth I's lead-laced face paint, the Romans' communal but sponges, the samurais' tooth-blackening rituals. We may laugh at their methods, but their goal was ours, to feel, for one sparkling moment, untouched by time's decay. Whether through perfume or penicillin, that desire remains unchanged. Now go forth and bathe, or don't. Either way, you're in good, if questionably scented, company.